Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's Security Boulevard webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great webinar on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to listen to it later on. Following today's event, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for either of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions, and we will get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. Also, at the end of today's webinar, we will be doing a drawing for 3 $50 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our big 3 winners. Okay, with that, we'll kick off today's webinar, which is Shift Application Security Knowledge Left to Deliver Secure Code on Time. Our speakers today are Ian McLeod, who is Chief Product Officer at Veracode, and he's being joined by Fletcher Heisler, who is the Director of Developer Enablement at Veracode. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Right, so Ian, I believe you are going to be kicking us off, so I'm going to put myself on mute and let you get right to it.
Okay, great. Hello, everybody. Good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. I'm very happy to have this opportunity, to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on at Veracode. It's an exciting time and it's an exciting market, and we've recently made an exciting launch. So we'd like to tell you a little bit about that, and a little bit about how it kind of fits into the Veracode approach. So first, I'd like to chat just a little bit about the market. So application security, I feel is a very, very exciting market. I mean, it's large, it's growing, but it's changing. It's dynamic. There's a lot of things going on. We don't develop software the way we used to. Application security is being challenged by the advent of a lot of new things. Modern development processes and pipelines are changing the way we develop software, changing how we go about it. It's frequent releases. It's very automated processes. It's a challenge in terms of how we fit security, application security into that process. Open source is bringing a lot of changes to development. I can remember back when open source was something, kind of to be managed and feared, and now, companies are making very strategic, deliberate decisions to employ open source. Developers use open source components in their applications. Developers use open source components in their stacks, and developers use open source tools as part of their development pipeline. And that kind of leads us to how we build development pipelines. It's no longer built out of a suite of tools from one vendor. It's built out of a bunch of integrated tools, best of breed tools. They may be commercial, they may be open source, but developers take those best of breed tools and use those to automate their processes. And this leads to really a wide ecosystem of tools and integrations. So if we are to provide seamless and easy application security, we need to kind of fit into these different market drivers. So I'd like to kind of, move into DevOps and some of the impacts that it's having. So like the trend of quality and testing before it, application security is really shifting left. And in a DevOps world, we can no longer wait until deployment time to do our security testing. Every step in the process is really an opportunity to improve security. It means that security needs to fit the way the developers work, needs to be fast, automated, needs to provide actionable information. We need to kind of seamlessly fit into developer processes, developer tools, and adapt to those types of skill sets. Veracode has really embraced the concept of security throughout the development pipeline. Security testing needs to take place at the right point in the process at a speed fast enough for that stage in the pipeline while providing concise, actionable information. That means fast, static, and dynamic and interactive scans at deployment time. It means even faster scans that can take place at build time and near immediate feedback in the pre-commit time in the IDE. So our new tool set fits right into these different phases, shifts the process left, gives developers information as early as possible in the process so as to fix flaws early when it's cheaper and easier. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way here. Yet the ultimate shift left is really helping the developer to write secure code in the first place. Tools are great, processes are great. Having those tools and processes integrated and automated is great, but really what is the most effective way to write good code is to help the developer write secure code in the first place. It's really about technical skills. It's about just-in-time information. And to that end, we're going to take a look at Veracode's latest launch, Security Labs, which is a new part of our developer enablement focus area. Security Labs lets a developer learn by doing, by writing code, and getting feedback. So if I bring this all the way up to our approach to the market, we kind of approach the market three different ways. So one is, we help with application security governance, right? So that's helping our customers define programs to achieve goals, helping them scale through best practices and sell the value of application security. We help ensure application security through our technology, our application analysis. So that includes scans throughout the development pipeline. It includes static scans, it includes dynamic scans, includes interactive scans, and even manual penetration testing after deployment. But today, I'd like to talk about developer enablement a little bit more. So here, we're really kind of focusing on not just finding flaws, but fixing flaws or even reducing the introduction of new flaws. And to that end, I'd like to turn things over to Fletcher Heisler. Fletcher is our Director of Developer Enablement. He was the founder and CEO of Hunter2, a company that was recently acquired by Veracode, and he leads our developer enablement business area, and he is going to tell us all a little bit more about Security Labs and how Security Labs helps developers learn, and it helps developers learn in a way that works best for developers.
Thanks, Ian. Let me just share my screen as well here. And I'm going to jump straight into a little demo of Security Labs. So Veracode has had traditional e-learning as part of our training offerings, which can help on the compliance and governance side, traditional video courses that developers can watch. We have recently leveled this up with Security Labs, which we hope, in this shift left, can help drive adoption and engagement, and really help developers get that practical training through these hands-on labs. So we just wanted to walk you through a little bit about our approach and how those labs work, and what you can do potentially to emulate or use some of this in terms of your own development training efforts for secure coding. So this is just a quick demo account from our own Veracode team. You can see some of our team members in here are competing for the top scores. All of our training primarily aligns around the OWASP top 10 kind of topics. So the top 10 industry standard most common vulnerabilities and weaknesses that happen in modern applications. We also have some other topics covered, things like open redirects, basically things that our customers and the marketplace has said, here's what we're seeing coming out of pen tests, out of red team reports, out of bug bounties. And we turn those into labs and into additional lessons so that they can learn from those experiences and make sure that they're closing that feedback loop and not making the same mistakes. We also have some other topics, things like a new set of labs on user privacy, user data privacy. So if your company handles PII or it's dealing with GDPR, instead of having to read through a bunch of documentation and hope you absorb it, you actually get to play with an application that's sort of a fake jog tracking app that's a lot more interactive. It does everything terribly, and so you get to fix it along the way and learn how you should be thinking about architecting a secure application that handles data privacy correctly. If I go into one of these topics, you'll see that there are a number of lessons and challenges, and it's sort of tracking my progress here. You can see that I completed the Java version of this particular lab. They are language specific, and so if I were a .NET developer or a developer working in JavaScript and Node.js, I would want to go through that version of the lab, because sometimes the best practices are slightly different. And it's obviously helpful to see languages, applications that are written in the language of my choice, so that I can get the familiarity with the tools that are meant for the job in terms of what I work with day in, day out. So here are a couple lessons. Those lessons guide you through step by step. They don't expect any other knowledge besides the fact that you are, for instance, a Golang-based developer. The extra practice challenges are challenging. So they're not going to guide you through step by step, but if you've been through the lessons or if you're familiar with a topic, you should be able to dive in and continue leveling up and practicing those skills. And so that way you're not always just going through the same exact lessons every year or every month, but you're continuing to level up with slightly new scenarios. Now, each of these individual labs is, roughly speaking, 10 to 15 minutes. It depends on the topic, it depends on the individual and how deep you want to go. They're all based around real applications. And so if you want to explore and get creative, you're welcome to do so within those labs. I'm going to go into a specific lab here. This is just one that I'm familiar with, so I can show around a bit. I won't go through a whole lab, but you can see in just a couple seconds here, what this has done is it gives me access to a real server. So this terminal is, not a simulation, not a REPL or something. It's actually the server that's running my web application that I have full access to. And it created this just for me on the cloud. So it's also got this vulnerable web app that I can interact with in various ways. So this is also tracking my progress. And if I move on to the next step, this is giving me step-by-step instructions. I'm not just going to be able to zone out and click next. I actually have to interact with the app in the expected ways here. So if I just click next here, it will start giving me hints. I might want to phone a friend. And if I phone a friend here, you can see some of my teammates who have completed this lab. I might want to reach out for internal mentorship. What we're going to do with each of these labs is two things, and it's really important to get experience with both halves there. We're going to exploit this vulnerable web app. I actually get to hack it and see what can happen firsthand. So rather than just read a paragraph about here's why cross-site scripting is bad, I actually get to see here's what can happen. And because it's a real app, I can play around and see where that might trip up my own applications, depending on the exact circumstance or the scenario I'm after. In the second half of the lab, we're actually going to practice writing secure code. So again, it's not just about, can you hack it? Okay, great, now don't do that. But the actual building of muscle memory, the hands-on keyboard practice of patching up the application itself. So in this example, this is a lab on open redirects. So I can register, view members, delete my account. Turns out other people can delete my account too. This is a very insecure app. You can see I can move forward here because I've now completed this step. I do have a skip button. That's just because I've completed those steps before, and so it saves my progress, and I can always skip through here. But if I had not, that wouldn't be available. Excuse me. This is also, again, a real web application. So if I want to go out here, no problem. I can run this through a web proxy if I wanted to run this in a workshop or share that URL. Likewise, this is an open redirect type of app. So a really common pattern, if I try to go to some sort of page here, it will say, oh, great, log in, and then we'll redirect you there. So in this case, we can redirect us, let's say, to a completely different domain. And we would take the user through, in this case, what would happen if we redirected you to a page that looked like your login page but wasn't? Or it might be a malicious file download or something like that. And again, because this is a real web app, we can try out all of those possibilities. Now in the second half, and I won't go through all the steps, we will guide you through. We might give you some example syntax. In this case, we might talk about blacklist versus whitelist, different strategies for combating this type of issue that we see in the wild. And I'm going to go into the code itself and patch it up. So this is the actual source code of this Node.js application. This is the vulnerable portion here, where I end up having to essentially rewrite the code and patch it up, make sure that it's no longer vulnerable. So in this case, if I wanted to try out various different ways, I can get creative with that. So I could say, try out my own syntax as an example. What this is doing on the back end is measuring whether the application is still vulnerable. So it's saying, how does the application respond? Is it still hackable? Is it giving the expected responses? And so you can get creative there as well. You can always save my place or come back later, restart if I get interrupted along the way, or if I want to make some changes, but I might want to undo those later. And I can always revisit previous steps as well. So that's a quick overview of the actual learning interface. In terms of some of the pieces for the carrot and the stick, we have some users who will love access to this kind of learning material, and the more they can get, the better. Of course, we need to help some along and make sure that they're keeping up with their required training for the compliance reasons as well. So on the competitive engagement side, obviously we have this leaderboard, configurable leaderboard. So if you wanted to look at per team or run a one-time competition, for each of these labs that you're completing, you're gaining more points as you go along. Excuse me. So there's also, which is not showing here, but a competition mode. So if you wanted to run a capture the flag type of event, you would have a little timer up here that counts down how much time is remaining for completing some subset of the labs. A lot of our customers like to do this as a kickoff event or as sort of a capstone competition. Once you've been through some lessons, compete with some extra practice challenges and sort of a time-limited, maybe day-long or even hour-long competition, and see how much you can get through there. We've also got a number of additional practice challenges in terms of other applications that our customers have been using in the past for their own trainings as well. So if any of you are familiar with JuShop as an example, this is an OWASP project. It's a JavaScript-based application, mean stack, and it has about 50 some different vulnerabilities built into it. So it's sort of a fake e-commerce store. What our customers were doing previously was having everybody set up their own instance of JuShop. You'd download an image, set up a database, and be ready to go half a day later. In this case, JuShop is now part of the platform as well. So in just a couple seconds here, I have a fully functional fake e-commerce store that is tracking my progress. I'll solve this first challenge because this one's easy. Most of them are a bit more involved. This is just a hidden URL. But because this is tracking my progress, it can also reinforce the right lessons and say, here's what's happening, here's why. Here are the sorts of things that you should be watching out for when these sorts of issues crop up. Likewise, I can optionally provide access to the underlying source code so I can see what went wrong and then practice patching that or seeing ways that you might want to improve that code. And then in terms of user setup overall, we can assign users and roles. And so we have different groups depending on maybe tech stack or seniority or team manager. That just really depends on how the team is organized. From there, we can assign content to roles. So we might have, we just have this one developer role here, but we might say these are our Java-focused developers or our front-end devs or a new onboarding cohort. And then we would assign content to them here. And so we can make that optional or required and report on that separately. I could also say, here is a due date. And this is due at the end of this month. And let's set up an automated email reminder as well. And so this will, maybe say as an example, these are due in a couple work days. So you get some reminders that automatically get sent out to the right folks of here are your remaining labs. Here are the pieces you're yet to finish of your required content. So it's very configurable. You can also export progress in terms of compliance tracking, and we do have a number of customers using these labs for PCI compliance and other training compliance measures as well. We can also export, at the campaign level or overall at the users level. One last thing that's really interesting about these labs, they're all fully customizable. So that lesson text that you saw on the left, if you wanted to change that up, a lot of our customers like to write their own conclusions. And so that might, as an example, link back to their own documentation or say, here's how we handle authorization now that you just went through a lab focused on that topic. Maybe link back to a pull request that is where this kind of problem actually came up for that team before. So it makes it a very sticky and relevant training moment. Again, rather than just saying, hey, read some documentation, I hope you remember it, you can link those back and forth depending on the particular training and the topics that you want to focus on. You can go even deeper than that. And we do have a couple customers who have used security labs as kind of a sandbox for creating their own labs from scratch. So in that case, they might be even pulling in their own application code. They might be saying, as an example, here is a bit of sample code that we've since updated, but we're now going to pull that into this container interface and be able to use that as ongoing practice for new team members so that they can learn from that experience as well. So that was a tour of security labs. There are lots more little features in the nooks and crannies, but hopefully that gives you a good overview of how we're now approaching developer security training and giving engineers hands-on practice with getting a sense for why these kinds of vulnerabilities matter, as well as practicing actually writing secure code. I'm going to flip over to a quick closing slide here. And I believe these links can be shared in chat as well, so that you can get out to some of these additional resources. But besides that, we're happy to open it up for some question and answer.
All right, great. Yes, plenty of time for questions. So if you have a question for either Ian or Fletcher, please go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel, and we will go ahead and get started with our questions. Let's see. Our first question, I joined a few minutes late, is securitylabs.veracode.com access free?
It's not. That is for teams with registered accounts. And so if you sign up, you just won't see anything there. However, we are planning to do sort of a community edition as well that will have some subset of content where you as an individual can log in and just get open access as well. We're planning as well to do things in terms of, for instance, when news comes out and we want to write a quick blog post about a new breach or attack or vulnerability in the wild, wherever it makes sense to, if we can spin up a lab that you also get free access to make sure that you're on top of those kinds of topics, that's also part of the plan for that community edition. So stay tuned.
Okay, great. Got a couple kind of logistics type questions regarding the security labs. How is it useful for a developer, and will I get any credits to learn and try the labs? And then, if you want to go into how much it costs or not. So.
Sure. I'm not sure about the credits to learn. It sounds like that may be another question around sort of a community edition as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully already answered that one a bit. In terms of how it's useful to the developer, we focus very much on the practical lessons that you need day to day as an example, a Python web developer. And so if I'm working in Django, I don't necessarily need to watch a 2-hour video on the terminology behind SQL injection and the history of it and so forth. And so we skip over all of that. We do teach some of the terms as needed, but primarily what we're going to say is when you're dealing with a database in Django of this variety of a SQL style database, here is the common ORM to use. This is the industry standard practice for that. And you get to see what goes wrong when you don't do that. So here's why it matters. Hopefully it's kind of the fun part of breaking it as well, and seeing that you can hack an app that looks like your code. And then you get to practice likewise. Here are the details of what you should be doing when you interact with a database. So again, this is meant to be very specifically assigned. So it's for your language, or your topics that you deal with day in, day out as a developer. And so all of it should hopefully be very practical and relevant to your day job.
All right, great. Next question. How much total content is there now? Looking for an estimated completion time. And then do you have any plans for adding additional content?
Great question. So we've got hundreds of labs already. The coverage depends specifically on tech stack a little bit in terms of which language or languages you're supporting. But for all of the languages we support, which are all the main ones, just off the top of my head, Python and Django and Flask, Java, JavaScript, .NET, Golang. We're just wrapping up support for PHP and Scala, support for Ruby and Rails. We have, as well as some lower level stuff in C and C++. And so for all of those, for all of the AppSec related ones, we have full coverage across the OWASP top 10. If you're looking for minimal sort of PCI compliance of let's make sure to get some training in per topic, then generally speaking, just a few hours total is all you need. And we do recommend spreading that throughout the year. So doing, for instance, a topic of the month where you just have 15, 20 minutes maybe for those few weeks to make sure that you go in and complete a few labs. Generally speaking, you can get folks up to snuff on the basics that way. Now, we also recommend that you should be making additional content at least optionally available for your security champions who really want to dive in deep, or for those folks who have a little bit more experience and really want to challenge themselves. And the practice challenges can take sometimes much longer than 10 minutes each because they are challenging and they're less directly guided. And so those, we've certainly never had anyone just run out of content in terms of trying to work their way through the challenges as well. In terms of other future content, we, as I mentioned, are wrapping up PHP, Laravel, and Scala focused labs, Play framework. Other plans, we're thinking about some AWS focused labs as well on cloud security. We've got a lot of teams who are saying, it's great to be able to write secure code, but we're also in charge of deploying it now. And so on the DevOps side, we want to make sure that we have secure infrastructure. And the labs are a really interesting way to think about providing that kind of interface, that kind of training. So we're starting to explore those kinds of topics as well.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. All right, plenty of time for questions, guys. So if you have another one, please go ahead and send it on in. Let's see, regarding the .NET coverage, do the labs include the older full FAT framework? We're getting in the weeds here now.
Yeah, I am not as personally experienced on .NET, but I know that all of our current labs are running .NET Core because they are all based essentially on Linux boxes under the hood. We do have some PowerShell experiments in the works as well. We just haven't had a need or a big desire from current customers for that. So I think a lot of the there's a whole lot of overlap, and we have gotten good enough coverage to just focus on the latest .NET Core right now.
Okay, all right, great. Let's see. Okay, is this a brand new offering from Veracode? When was it released or announced?
It is. So as Ian alluded, this was previously part of Hunter 2, which is where I was previously founder and CEO. So I've been working on this project for a number of years. The acquisition was completed back in January, and I believe officially announced a couple weeks ago, pre-RSA. But we are now live and offering and doing the initial pieces of integration with the Veracode platform overall, as of throughout RSA last week.
All right. Excellent. So many great questions. Let's see, next question. How do I keep a team engaged with security and make sure they're completing their required training?
Sure. So I think there are a couple things that I mentioned briefly there around keeping them both engaged and on the compliance piece as well. There's the carrot and the stick, right? So there's the leaderboard, the competition aspect that works really well for some teams, and certainly not for all. It depends somewhat on company culture. But those who do have a competitive streak, it's a really great way to gamify the process a bit in terms of setting up competitions or just generally letting you continue to level up by tracking your points and your progress that way. Now for folks who really need a little bit more impetus to make sure that they get through their required training, you can also set up custom reminders and campaigns that will let you know how you're progressing across your required training. Make sure that you're staying up to date that way as well. And that's also part of why we recommend just a little bit at a time, ongoing. So rather than, here's our security training day or two out of the year, and then we hope you remember it, that takes a lot of time out of a developer's day. These short labs that are really just 10-15 minutes, if you can squeeze one in per month as an example, it's much less interruptive. You can find time between meetings to just jump in and take a look at a lab, or when you have some downtime while you're coding and want something fresh to look at. But that way it's also a constant reminder and helps keep security top of mind, rather than something that you get through, you watched all your videos and now you're done. It's something you can always keep coming back to.
All right, excellent. Okay, next question here. Can I create my own apps in security labs?
Yes. So most often what you would do in terms of the customization of code itself would be, all of this is based on a Docker image as part of the lab itself. And so you could either clone in your own code sort of from scratch, and we only have a couple small rules about how things should be interacting for us to make sure that we can connect to your application. Or you could take one of our existing labs essentially as a template. So you might take an application that has basic registration and authentication built in for your language and framework of choice already, and then say from there, here's how we want to insert this little bit of code because here's the particular quirk that we ran into and we want to get extra practice on.
All right, let's see. Okay, great. Next question. How does this approach compare to other available training options?
Sure. So I mentioned in terms of traditional e-learning, we also offer the video courses, and that's certainly easier to roll out. We make this as easy as possible, but it is a bit more of a time investment for the team. And so if you're looking to get something out there, for example, for compliance, that's least effort possible and get it out very quickly, that might still be a way to go. Of course, because it's entirely passive, it's a little tougher to engage folks, and it's pretty much impossible to make sure that the training is actually sticking without doing a lot more hands-on work yourself. There are a number of other solutions out there of a variety of, I guess, what would be referred to as interactive training. A lot of the time that's either focused on exploits, so it's more security training for developers where you get to hack stuff and then you get to learn, hey, I shouldn't do that. And it's kind of missing the piece of actually writing secure code, or how should you be preventing that, what strategies, and actually getting that practice. Or likewise, if you are going over that, a lot of the time it devolves kind of into a multiple choice test, right? So here's one of 4 options, and click through that, and now we're done. So, hopefully there's some learning happening there. The benefit of the security labs being fully interactive is that there's kind of no shortcut, but there's also a lot of room for creativity. So you actually get to interact and patch up the application and write that secure code yourself to get that kinds of hands-on practice. I always say, as a developer, I learned how to code by coding. I didn't just watch videos and hear people talk about it and then I could code. I had to practice. And likewise, to write secure code, you really need to build up that muscle memory and not just watch it happen and then be released into the wild.
Excellent. All right, guys, like I said before, still plenty of time for questions. So if you have one, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and we'll keep going until we don't have any more. Next question here, would it be possible to scan the cloned code and identify the security vulnerabilities as part of the lab?
Yes, theoretically, yes, and we're starting to experiment with that now. So we're actually pulling in some of Veracode's own tooling around things like API access, so that we can both train on Veracode products, as well as get that full cycle and see, as an example, that you're scanning, realizing that there is an issue based on those results, and from there, being able to patch that up, rescan, and verify the fix.
Okay.
And we certainly have longer term plans to more fully integrate security labs into the Veracode suite, in terms of, you could imagine, sort of completing that full feedback loop through those various products as well.
Excellent. All right, great. Next question, do you have a demo video that I can share with my leadership?
We don't have a sort of publicly facing demo video just yet. We'd love to get in touch, and we can always give a quick screen share. But I believe we'll probably be making one of those very soon.
All right. So Aaron, stay tuned for that. So next question. Let's see.
Glad to hear it will be put to use.
Yeah. What is a measure of success for using this? So I guess do you get a certificate or? Yeah.
Sure. Actually, one thing, I believe I'm still sharing my screen here. One thing that I didn't show, let's go here to a brand new lab. Let's do that, sure. So this piece here is the very first time that I visit a lab, I'm being asked to sort of rate my knowledge from 0 to 5. I'm going to be asked this again at the end of the lab as well. And so, it's not as useful as an individual metric, because what I think is a 1, someone else might think is a 4 or a 5. But in aggregate, when you're reporting on that, what you'd like to be able to see is a big delta there, right? And so one measure of success would certainly be to take a look at that change over time and throughout the labs, and hopefully you're seeing a big increase in those scores overall, that folks are reporting, hey, I'm much more familiar with X or Y topic. Likewise, that can help you notice when you might have some strong points or weak points, and you might want to focus in on a particular topic as well. Okay. Besides that, I think also just overall engagement, right? So making sure that folks are getting through their requirements and hopefully going above and beyond that as well.
Aha. Well, that actually is a great segue to the next question, which is how do you check that a developer is actually engaging with the material and learning as they go along?
So I think the labs have a really unique point that you really have to engage and learn as you go. There's kind of no shortcuts in that you can't click next and zone out and be done. You're actually interacting with that application, and so if you've demonstrated that you can exploit it, you can patch it up. You've demonstrated competence. The assessment is kind of built into the lesson itself. Um, in terms of maybe the broader question of how do I keep track of a team or how do I make sure that they're progressing overall, we also have in-platform reporting in terms of per team or across the organization to take a look at overall progress and progress across required completion percentage. All of that is exportable as well. So if you're looking at that for instance, PCI compliance, you could just reach out to your auditor with the CSV. We also have an API for if you had, for instance, an internal dashboard. Then you can report on user progress automatically and then pull that kind of progress into your own reporting tools as well.
All right, great. Next question. Are there security labs for C or C++ secure code development?
There are. We cover all of the main points there in terms of the various types of overflows. We actually get you in GDB taking a look at the code and figuring out where things went wrong in memory or in the stack. So we do have really great coverage there as well.
Awesome.
And a lot of that is focused, I would say, around safe code. Not always from the point of an external attacker and what they might be able to do, but rather, what happens if you don't keep this promise as expected in one part of the code? How might that go wrong elsewhere?
All right, so many great questions. I'm really impressed by these. Okay, moving along. From a business perspective, are there key result areas that measure outcomes from these moving left?
Could you say that one again?
Sure. From a business perspective, are there key result areas that measure outcomes from these moving left? I'm assuming he's talking about shifting left in the DevOps toolchain.
Yeah, I'm figuring out these actually. There are a lot of things shifting left.
Right. I don't know, maybe the secure code, I don't know.
Yeah, so I think what you should be seeing overall with the shift left and being able to offer this kind of training to developers is that your cycles are faster. You are seeing fewer of the same vulnerability, meaning that you're learning from your mistakes and you're actually progressing as a team in this kind of knowledge. So if you have focused your training on these three OWASP topics, ideally you're seeing many fewer of those coming up in future scans and reports. And likewise, that you're seeing fewer issues overall. And so, we've been focused at Veracode. We've seen over time that with this shift left, folks are scanning more and more frequently. It's my hypothesis they should be training more and more frequently as well in order to make full use of that increasingly quick feedback cycle.
I can add a little bit to that too. Is Veracode has pretty robust reporting and analytics built into the platform, and part of those analytics are charts that can kind of show the advantage of doing additional scans at different points in the pipeline. So as you start to move left and start doing kind of pipeline scans at build time and start doing IDE scans at kind of commit time, you start to see that the discovery of defects start to shift left. Now, we haven't done the full integration of security labs into that analytics, but likewise, eventually we'll have that integration done so that you can see the impact of the training on you know, flaws that are discovered further down the process. So the analytics would allow you to kind of measure that and you know, measure not only how many flaws are actually making it to production or not, but more so where they're being found, and presumably you would start to see discovery moving left, and you know, ultimately no discovery at all because we're not putting the flaws in the first place.
All right, great. Okay, I think I have a couple more questions, then we'll go ahead and shut it down here. Let's see, I know you went over this earlier, but could you again talk about what languages are supported and planned by Security Labs?
Sure. So again, this is off the top of my head. I might miss one, but I believe Java primarily in Spring, Python, Django, Flask, Ruby on Rails, .NET, .NET Core, recent or soon about to add PHP, Laravel, as well as Scala with the Play framework. We have support for Golang as well. And C++ on some of the lower level side as well. Some other topics that we cover, some basic intro to shell, you know, navigating around the terminal, some topics around basic forensic skills, some of the forensic tools in the terminal as well, user data privacy, and so focusing on GDPR and handling PII in a sensible way. I believe that covers it for now. But lots of plans for additional rollout as well. So I mentioned, you know, we're exploring ways to focus on AWS and cloud security, some of the DevOps topics as well. Another that we'll be adding that's on the roadmap is some mobile-focused coverage. So around most likely Kotlin and Swift. You know, we rather than just lessons covering the OWASP top 10 in Kotlin, what we're actually looking for is topics that typically come up in a practical setting when you're building mobile applications. And so that might be a slightly different subset depending on what we're hearing from customers and from the industry. But we want to make sure that we focus on the topics that matter specific to mobile devs in their day-to-day as well.
All right, great. Okay, next question. Does the tool provide guidance or best practices on how to resolve the security vulnerabilities, or would it be up to the developer to research and apply the patch accordingly?
We do provide the guidance and the best practices through the process of the lessons. So we won't do that in the extra practice challenges, but in the core lessons, we talk through various strategies. We talk through you know, often security comes down to practical trade-offs. And so we might even be discussing, as an example, here's when you might choose not to implement this particularly onerous security measure, because you know, now it comes down to a choice between user convenience versus what's the level of security or confidentiality of the data that you're protecting. So we do get into some of those guidance pieces as well in terms of industry best practices and how to think about these kinds of problems at a sort of architectural level.
Okay, great. I think we'll do 2 more questions and then we'll close things out. Does Veracode have a plugin to integrate into Jenkins pipeline?
Not specifically through Security Labs just yet, although as I mentioned, we definitely have plans to integrate that into the various stages of the developer lifecycle, the way that we have with other Veracode products as well. So you're on the right track, definitely.
Okay, all right. All right, one more question here. How does this compare with the Veracode's existing e-learning product?
Sure. So we're selling these as 2 separate products right now, and I think often they fit 2 separate use cases. As I mentioned, on the e-learning side, more traditional recorded video courseware, and so it's very easy to roll out, very quick, especially for basic compliance measures. If you're just, you know, you need to get something out for a PCI audit, as an example, and likewise. more often tailored to very beginning or more junior developers. Whereas if you want to continue leveling up and get your developers more engaged and more involved on the security lab side, with the additional practice challenges and with the hands-on aspect of it, it is targeted to professional developers. And so, we won't assume lots of expert knowledge, but it does go a little bit above and beyond in terms of diving into some of the more challenging, complex topics. It's also, more geared toward modern development technologies. So we're focused on things like Node.js or things like newer tech that might be changing more rapidly that we can handle by spinning up labs very quickly, rather than writing out full courses on them. It might just be a very quick 5 or 10 minute sandbox, but here's the new topic that you should be aware of and is happening in the industry. So as an example, we actually just created a few labs focused specifically around React.js. They are not vulnerabilities in React, but they are things that we saw were happening with a number of teams introducing React, where they thought, here's this great new technology, we can just plug it in and it will take care of all of these mostly cross-site scripting injection vulnerabilities for us, which it does an admirable job of, but there are some gotchas. And so we're also focused on within the security labs, keeping folks up to date with those kinds of corner cases, and especially if you're introducing some new technology, might want to take a look at those lessons.
Okay, great. Okay, we are about 9 minutes to the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and give Fletcher a break and end the question and answer period. I do want to thank everybody who did submit questions. So many great questions. I was really, really impressed by the number and the content of the questions. So thanks very much, guys. Want to remind everybody that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, or if you just want to watch it again, you will have the opportunity to do so. We are going to be sending out an email after today's webinar that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the Security Boulevard website. So you can always go look for it there. Just go to securityboulevard.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Also, before we close things down, I do want to do our drawing for 3 $50 Amazon gift cards. So without further ado, our winners today are Christina R. Congratulations, Christina. Danielle H. Congratulations, Danielle. And Tom S. Congratulations, Tom. We'll be getting in touch with all 3 of you via email after today's webinar to get your gift card over to you. I want to thank Fletcher and Ian for such a great presentation. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate the time you spent today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Enjoyed it.
All right, great. Also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody.